Welcome to the Finance Marketing Podcast, a show that empowers finance professionals to market their businesses in ways that feel good and actually achieve results. I'm your host, Hillary. I've been working with folks in financial services to develop marketing strategies that work and create results-oriented marketing content since 2020. And I've learned a lot about what works in finance marketing, what doesn't work, and where financial services pros get stuck. Join us each Friday as we explore real, effective ways to market your finance business and connect with folks who truly embody your ideal clients. This week, I'm chatting with Allegra Cook, ghostwriter and strategist for 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs who want to uplevel their brand with a thought leadership business book they're proud of. I first met Allegra several years ago in an online community of copywriters we both belong to, and we actually had the pleasure of meeting in person for the first time this past January at a business retreat we attended in beautiful Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Allegra is just a true gem of a human being, and as a ghostwriter of thought leadership books for personal development professionals, she has a lot of great insights to share about writing thought leadership books for financial advisors and coaches who are interested in this powerful way to grow their personal brand. During our conversation, Allegra and I chat about the critical role of storytelling in thought leadership books. So if you've ever been worried that what you have to say about finance has already been said by somebody else, Allegra has some really brilliant advice for how to overcome that mindset block and write a book that is both compelling and different from others that may already be out there. Allegra also goes into detail about what you can and should do before you publish a thought leadership book so that you have a ready audience who is warmed up to your particular brand and is excited to purchase your book when it comes out. Finally, Allegra chats about what it looks like to work with a ghostwriter if you love the idea of having your own book out there, but you loathe the idea of writing it yourself. There is so much wisdom in this conversation, so if you're excited to hear more about thought leadership books and what that can mean for your business, let's dive in. Allegra, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me, Hillary. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm doing really well. It's a Friday, it's warm outside, can't beat it.
Amazing. Well, I would love to start if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are. You can go into as much or as little of your background as you want to, but tell us what you do today.
Awesome. Yeah. So I am a ghostwriter for entrepreneurs, people like consultants and coaches. What that means is that I write articles and thought leadership books that really help that type of entrepreneur stand out. So it helps them rise to the top of their industry, open doors to opportunities, and really helps them earn more revenue in their business. Um, the way I got here was a little bit non-traditional, like all of us in this writing freelance world. But I started my career actually at traditional advertising agencies. So I was actually working as an account manager, helping to launch campaigns on TV and print and radio. And in 2020, I decided that I really wanted to take my career path just kind of back into my own hands. I knew I wanted to work much closer to the clients that I was working with because I wanted to have a greater impact on their businesses, and also just get more into the skill of writing, which is something I've really loved since I was a kid. One of the majors I studied in college was creative nonfiction. So I knew I wanted to get back on that path essentially. I think we might have launched our copywriting businesses around the same time. So I first started in 2020 as a freelance copywriter. So the first few years of my business, I was really focusing around marketing copy. And what I realized after a few years was that my niche was really specializing in this area of thought leadership. I was writing a lot of long form content, and really the natural progression that came out of that to be able to help my clients kind of take their business to the next level and for me to do the same for my own was to step into this world of book ghostwriting. And it's been a really rewarding way to pivot my business.
I love that. I actually don't think I knew that you had this kind of like broader background in advertising. So I think that you probably bring a lot of insight and knowledge to your clients about just like the broader like advertising and marketing ecosystem. Um, so I'm excited to talk to you about book ghostwriting and using books as thought leadership and really drivers of like that next step in business, because a lot of financial advisors and coaches, if they don't have a book already, it's on their radar. They're really interested in like bringing their expertise to the forefront with a thought leadership book. And so I would love to talk a little bit about what you see as the benefits of writing a book or publishing a book for your business and for yourself.
Right. So, publishing a business book specifically is a really great way to grow your brand and your authority to the next level. So, if you think about the top leaders in the finance niche, even most of them have a book and they're an author. So, it's this really great way to open the door to just more opportunities in your business. I would say the biggest benefit is that it really does make you stand out as a leader of the conversations that are happening in your industry. And that's a huge benefit. Um, and what that can lead to is opportunities in your business. So if you are someone who wants to be able to book more speaking engagements and have a bigger platform to be able to share your message, there's a lot of speaking engagements that, won't even consider you unless you have a book. So it opens the door to bigger stages that lead to more revenue for your business. But also what I love to really come back to is that that's also really growing your impact. So the more people that it's allowing you to reach, the more people you're able to really share your philosophy with and help them make changes in their life. And if, your book is done right, then there's a high likelihood that those people are also going to come to you for your paid services, whether it's consulting or paid resources or coaching, things like that. So it all kind of feeds into itself.
Yeah, what I love about this notion of increasing your impact is that both financial advisors and coaches, a lot of them have the heart where they really want to help a lot of people, but they're also running a business. They have to charge, they have to charge fees that allow them to live the life that they want to and that keep the business running and things like that. And so they can't work with everyone. But by writing a book, it means that you actually can help so many more people who may not have the budget right now to work with you or may not ever have the budget to work with you. But you can still increase your impact without burning out on your own time, because we all only have so much time.
Exactly, exactly. I love that aspect of it, of what exactly like you said. There's so many coaches whose time is rightfully worth hundreds or thousands of dollars an hour. And obviously, not everyone is going to be able to make that investment. And your book is so much more of an accessible price point that for the people who aren't ready to work with you, they're still able to get your message and your philosophy. And then one day they might be ready to work with you and they want to come. They'll probably continue to be in your world and continue to follow you after they've read your book.
Right, right. So being in this world of book ghostwriting and, connecting with entrepreneurs who want to write a book, what are some common obstacles or challenges that you see people run into? Because writing a book is not something that you wake up and you go, I'm going to write a book today. I mean, this takes months and even years of planning. So, what are some challenges that you see?
Yeah, I would say that the most obvious one is the time commitment. So it does take, at times hundreds of hours to write a book. And if you're also writing a business, I'm sorry, working on your business, working with clients, it's obviously your time is already very stretched thin. And to then try and allocate that time towards writing a book is definitely a challenge. I would say an even deeper level of that is that when you are trying to figure out kind of what your narrative is going to be, what stories you're going to use, it's hard to do that when you're so close to your own stories and your own philosophy. You might kind of be doubting yourself of, is this really important? And what do I want to say here? And that's honestly an even bigger challenge, I would say,
Mm.
especially if you're someone who hasn't written a book in the past. It's this whole new type of project that you are just kind of learning and getting into.
Right. I would love to pick your brain a little bit since you have the background in creative nonfiction.
Yeah.
Um, how important has that been for you as a book ghostwriter to like bring some of that into? Because I think one thing that when we think of thought leadership books or personal development books, we don't think of like entertaining stories, but
Right.
that is an important part of any book, right? So, can you talk a little bit about how storytelling kind of plays a role in thought leadership books, no matter what niche or industry you might be in?
Yes. So if you think about different, let's say personal finance coaches in your industry, if you think about multiple different coaches, there's probably a chance that some of their programs and some of their approaches to how they coach with their clients, what they offer, there's probably some similarities in between their offers, which makes perfect sense because there's plenty of room for people with similar programs. What they're doing is going to help their audience in similar ways. So, what's really important is bringing in those stories, and that's what is going to differentiate your pillars and your approaches from what other people are offering. Because if five people wrote a book with the same approach and philosophies, it probably wouldn't be that interesting. But if each of those books comes from a place of your specific perspective and a story that backs up the pillar of that chapter and an anecdote that really helps your audience feel where they want to go, that is where the uniqueness of your book comes into play. And I would say that's one of my favorite parts of my job is being that person who can ask the right questions to bring out those
Mhm.
stories. So we can talk a little bit about process later on, but I will say that, for each chapter and each kind of leadership pillar that we want to communicate, we're also going to bring in a personal story and an anecdote and why that matters to the reader because it makes it so much more personal and easy for that person to connect with.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, I always talk to my clients and the financial advisors and coaches that I talk with about how storytelling is important in every way you show up
Mhm.
in your marketing, right? And so I can see how that would just need to be kind of like a shining pillar of your book as well as your stories and kind of getting clear on what those are, the stories that define you. Um, so, one interesting thing that I heard from a previous guest on the podcast, who's a financial therapist who has written several of his own books, was that one thing that he learned that he hadn't really thought about before he started embarking on the publishing process and things like that is that book length is important, not just, to tell the story, but also if you want to publish physical copies of your book, you have to have a spine thick enough to hold the title, right? And be able to put your name as the author on the spine and things like that. Are there any other things that come to mind when you think about writing and publishing a book that are just kind of like little tips or things that you may not have thought about or known before
Yeah,
you embarked on that endeavor?
I would say the biggest thing that authors should think about before they launch their book is really thinking about the ways that they are building their audience, especially
Mhm.
if someone wants to go down the self publishing route. And the benefit of the self publishing route is that you do have more ownership over your ideas, you earn more royalties up front. The challenging aspect of that route is that you are going to be responsible to for a lot of the sales that you're bringing in for your book, so that's where having an audience is so important,
Mm.
to really start building even in the meantime. And so that's something you can do. I know you and I, Hillary, are big on LinkedIn, both for ourselves and also recommending it for our clients. That's a really great place to it can be as simple as sharing your ideas in posts and sending people back to your email list. That email list is really important to continue to grow. Um, I think that's one area that people who are just coming out into getting used to kind of showing up online. That's one thing that can be a little bit of a hurdle in the beginning. But then I also work with entrepreneurs who already have that online presence. Maybe you are a top voice on LinkedIn and you have all this incredible thought leadership content that you've already written. I'm willing to bet that there is an outline of your book within that content that you've already written and published. So I also love working with people who already have that presence, and then we can repurpose that content into a whole outline for a book.
I think that's so smart. There is a foundation to be laid. I think that's one of the things too that was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me once when you think of a book as being almost a marketing tool, but it doesn't market itself. You also have to market the book in order to market your services, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people do kind of overlook. So I like that you brought that up. So you mentioned social media, it's you can build an audience, a presence on social media, and then you always want to be driving them into an email list. What would you say is the importance of that factor rather than just building an audience
Right.
on social media?
Right. So being able to, the difference between social media and somewhere like your email platform is that email is somewhere that you definitely own yourself. So social media, we know it can really vary in terms of the algorithm. It can, one day you can feel like you're reaching all of your followers, and the next you can feel like no one is seeing what you're writing about. I know that feeling very well. But with your email list, okay, I am going to reach this person in their inbox. And that's a really powerful thing to know as a business owner. So having this place where you always have, a way to promote your new offers, your new books in the future is really impactful. And it's also just a great place to really nurture your audience and to build that connection with them. And it's not that you need to sell to them every single day in your newsletter, but you can do simple things like reminding them at the end of your newsletter the ways that they can work with you. And there's a good chance that the more you're showing up in front of them, the more likely they are going to work with you and be excited about, your launch when you do announce a book launch in the future.
Hmm. Well, let's pivot a little bit because I have talked to a lot of financial advisors and coaches who do have books that are published, and they have done all the things that we've talked about. They've opened up these doors for them, given them access to bigger stages, things like that. What they don't ever talk about, and that I actually haven't asked about, is whether or not they completely wrote the book themselves
Right.
or if they worked with a ghostwriter. And I would be willing to bet, again, I don't know this for sure, but I would be willing to bet that the majority of them worked with a ghostwriter, at least in some capacity. Because, like you said, you're running a business, you're working with clients, you're probably creating content in other ways, whether that's on social media or podcasting or whatever it might be. Where do you find the time to write a book? And so that's where the opportunity to work with a ghostwriter, I think, can be really powerful and move you closer towards your goals. Before we jump into the actual process, I'm wondering, do you think that I am correct in my notion that people feel reluctant to say that they've worked with a ghostwriter, or that there are some hesitations, like in feeling like less authentic if I worked with a ghostwriter? Or am I totally off base there?
I definitely think that that's probably a hurdle that people, a mindset block maybe that someone might be experiencing. But what I will say about it is that the right ghostwriter is more of someone who's going to bring out the story and the ideologies that already exist within you. So it's very, very rare that a ghostwriter is someone who, meets with you one time and then writes your book. As
Mhm.
we'll talk about, the process is very in depth. You're meeting with them for every single chapter to tell what your perspective is, what your story is. So everything is coming from you. That writer is just really helping to mold it in a way that really resonates with your reader. And also, as we both know, just is simply able to put the time in to write the sentences and the words with clarity and creativity and all of the above. But the philosophy really does come from you.
Mm. So let's talk about your process. And just like financial advisors and coaches, I'm sure, yeah, every ghostwriter has a nuanced process where things are different. But I think it would be really helpful for people to hear if I am interested in working with a ghostwriter, what can I generally expect it to look like?
Yeah, definitely. So the first phase is going to be, after we go through a discovery phase where we make sure that we're the right fit for working together. The first phase of the actual project is going to be really getting a sense of what your overall book outline and objective of the book is.
Mhm.
So, one question that I actually learned from a mentor of mine that I like to ask my clients is, where do you want this book to take your business, essentially? Because
Mm.
we want to make sure we're writing a book that's going to get you where you want it to go, whether that is to launch a new program, like we said, book more speaking engagements, whatever it is, we want to make sure that that's really clear from the beginning. And then what I will do is after we, brainstorm what that objective is, what maybe you already have some ideas of what you want the book to be about, then I would create an outline of what the book looks like, the full book. And that's something that can be kind of tweaked and rearranged as we go, but that's really helpful to know from the beginning. This is our roadmap. This is what we want to accomplish. Here's where we think the stories are going to go. That's really important to give us clarity and make the process as efficient as possible. And then from there, that's when we dive into the process of interviewing. So I spoke a
Mm.
little bit about this, but essentially every chapter that we write, we will also have an hour long or 2 hour long interview for that chapter. And that's where, like I said before, we're going to draw those stories and anecdotes out of you. Because as a writer, it's easy for me to do research about your audience and think about a, leadership pillar, for example, that's going to be helpful for them. But what I really want to make sure is that we're telling the context and the background of how you got to that leadership pillar
Mm.
and anything that gives context and color to your philosophy, your background, all of that. So essentially that's the process for how each chapter is written. As we go, there's a lot of check-ins to make sure that the client is super happy with the voice and the tone of the book. And then once we get to the final rounds, we will bring in a proofreader and an editor to make sure that everything is very polished, so that by the end of our time working together, you do come away with a full manuscript of your book that is ready to take to a self-publisher that can help you get it to that published finish line.
Mm. So I know this varies with every client,
Yeah.
but in general, how long should someone expect the process to take from discovery call to like polished manuscript ready to move into the publishing phase? What should their expectations be?
Yes. So it's generally a 4 to 6 month process.
Mm.
So like you said, if it was a memoir or something that was really intensive, it could take longer than that. But for a business book, it's usually a 4 to 6 month process. And that give or take is also going to depend on your season of business. So if you are really busy, you're not able to meet every week for an interview, that makes the process a little bit longer.
Mm.
But one of my, I would say, strengths as a ghostwriter is being able to keep the project really on track because it is such a massive project. It'd be easy for it to just go on. I've actually worked with clients who said it has taken like 3 years with a different ghostwriter in the past.
Wow.
So I like to really make sure that we're staying on track. And that is, hinges on both of us getting things done at a certain time. That way you can know going into the project, okay, by the end of this 6 months, my book is going to be written if we hit all of these milestones.
Which I think can be really exciting and motivating too. Uh, Again, I know this question, the answer is going to totally vary, but do you see like a recommended number of chapters for a thought leadership book? Like when does it get too long? What's not enough to really qualify as a book?
I would say a general word count for a business book would be 40,000 to 50,000 words.
Mm.
So it's definitely, a memoir is closer to 60 to 80,000 words. So
Mm.
a business book that is sharing your, philosophy, your approach to your offer, whatever it is, that can be a little bit in that more reasonable range. And 40,000 words is still a massive project,
Right.
but that is usually the word count.
Right. Yeah. And just to put that into perspective for listeners, we see most blog posts in that like 1,000 word range or like 2,000 word range, right? So if you think, okay, does that mean, of course, I'm an English major and math is hard, but does that mean I'm going to need 40,000 blog posts, like for a book that might put it into perspective a little bit.
It's funny you say that because when I was first breaking into the world of ghostwriting, book ghostwriting, I was, a little intimidated by doing that large of a project. And I kept telling myself, well, my specialty was writing 3,000, 5,000 word articles for my clients. So I was like, you can do this. It's
Yeah.
just 10 articles. You know how to do that. And it honestly helps make it feel a lot more manageable.
That's right. I know I said 40,000 blog posts, but that would be one word blog post. It would be more like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, well, great. Are there any other tips or things that I should have asked you, Allegra, that I haven't yet that would be important for listeners to know, um, who maybe have just been dreaming about writing a book or partnering with a ghostwriter?
Yeah. I guess a couple of, for someone who is thinking about working with a ghostwriter, I could talk about a couple of traits that would be helpful to look for in that person because
Mm,
I know even on LinkedIn now, it feels like there's so many ghostwriters emerging. It might be hard for you to decide, okay, who should I work with? I
mm,
would say the biggest things to look out for is number one, looking for someone who can help you think about the broader strategy of where your book is going to go in basically the ecosystem of all your marketing. So,
mm.
like we talked about, you want to make sure you're working with someone who understands where you want your business to go and how you want your book to get there. It's also helpful to work with someone who, even if they don't handle the marketing for you, they have an understanding of the self publishing world and what it looks like to market your book yourself. Because there's definitely considerations. For example, as you're writing the book, the writer could be coming up with some ideas for an opt in that you use for the book marketing funnel and things like that that are going to tie in really cohesively. And the last one that I would say is, like we said, interviewing is really important. When it comes to actual skill, I really believe that with this new era that we are moving into, it's great to work with someone who does understand AI, someone who can help leverage the efficiency of AI and make their own
Mm.
process faster, but at the same time doesn't lean on it. So knows how to actually bring in those elements of storytelling and creativity and personal stories and things like that, but isn't afraid to use AI to kind of make your process more efficient and faster.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's something that we didn't touch on at all. And I think it is a really relevant piece of the conversation these days because, of course, no one wants to read a book that was written by AI, right? But if you can find someone who, you know, uses AI in the right ways to make it more efficient, like you said, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Allegra, last question for you, and I actually I'm only ever asking you this question. I haven't asked anyone else this question, but as a ghostwriter, as a fan of personal development and things like that, what are some of your favorite personal development books that you've read?
Oh, that's such a good question. So, the book I'm rereading right now is The Big Leap by Gay
Mm,
Hendricks. That's a book about what it's like when you reach your upper limit problem, which is essentially when you reach a new level of success and then you kind of start to sabotage yourself because it's scary to be at that new level, which is something I do to myself. So that's always a good one to reread. Um, One of my favorites is Big Magic by Elizabeth
mm,
Gilbert. That is kind of a mixture of personal development and living your life creatively. The main message of it is essentially how to live creatively and move forward even in the face of fear. So I guess there's kind of the theme of these books that I like to read. That's
Mm.
a good one. And then I also will say Dr. Joe Dispenza. I love all of his books around um, rewiring your brain, overcoming mindset blocks, and things like that.
Okay. Well, the one that you mentioned, the first one, The Big Leap, I have not read yet, so I'm
Yeah,
excited to check that one out. That sounds really good.
that is a good one. Have you read the other ones?
I have read Big Magic and I have read one of Dr. Joe Dispenza's books, and I
Yeah,
also really, yeah, I'm a fan.
they're dense, but once you can kind of get through the science of it, then it becomes really a good read.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can people find you, Allegra, if they want to learn more about you?
I would love to connect on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn profile, you can just find me under my name. And also my website is theallegracook.com. I actually just released an article that's a really deep dive into how to work with a ghostwriter, if that's something that you're interested in. So
Mm.
you can look at that if that would be helpful.
Great. Yes, I actually read that article when you posted it. I think it was fairly recently, and it was a really great article. So I'll link to all three of those things in the show notes. And otherwise, thank you so much, Allegra. This has been a really fun conversation, and thank you to all of our listeners for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. If you're eager to market your business in a way that feels good and actually gets results, sign up for the Finance Marketing Podcast newsletter in the show notes so you never miss another episode. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite listening app and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you back here next Friday.